division or the cord level, then as a whole, the whole of the brachial plexus will be blocked and you can perform or provide anesthesia to the parts below the shoulder joint. Right, but if you block any further below the shoulder joint, then what will happen is only specific parts of the nerve will be blocked. You won't be anesthetizing the upper limb as a whole. So there are various parts where you can provide this block to provide anesthesia for providing anesthesia for specific surgeries. So we'll start from the upper part. Suppose you are providing anesthesia for a clavicle fracture. You have seen here many clavicle surgeries are done. So if you need to provide anesthesia, you need to block this upper part of the upper limb, right? So you have to block the brachial plexus at its highest level. Where do we block it? We block it at the level of the roots, right? This is called the interscalene block. There is one picture. This brachial plexus ka picture is given. If you see, you will find there are two muscles. First, you have the sternocleidomastoid. If you make your neck taut, you will feel the sternocleidomastoid. Lateral to the sternocleidomastoid lies the anterior scalene muscle. And further lateral to it lies the middle scalene muscle. So, two scalene muscles, in between lies the interscalene groove. There are two muscles of the scalene groove, anterior and middle. In between lies the brachial plexus in the interscalene groove. So if you provide drugs, what drugs you will be providing? Local anesthetic agents. Lignocaine adrenaline combination, plain lignocaine, bupivacaine, ropivacaine, any drug of your choice, whichever is suitable for the specific patient. If you provide anesthesia at this level, in the interscalene groove, you will be blocking the brachial plexus at its root level and hence you will be providing anesthesia for upper limb surgeries, right? Upper limb near the shoulder region. So how you will block these nerves? There are three methods of providing regional anesthesia. First is called landmark guided. Second is called PNS or peripheral nerve stimulator guided. And the third is known as ultrasound guided. Right? What is the landmark guided method and the most practiced method? Because in every setup, we don't get this PNS and ultrasound machines. So we do it by landmark guided. As I told you, first, you can palpate your sternocleidomastoid once you make your neck taut in the opposite direction, okay? So once you palpate the sternocleidomastoid, gradually if you go lateral to it, you can feel the two bellies of the scalene muscles, the anterior and the middle scalene. And if you can palpate both of them, in between you will get the interscalene groove. There you have to prick your needle and once you hit the nerve, there will be a tingling sensation or electric current like sensation. When you get a shock, there's a sudden shock wave in your body, that electric current sensation that the patient will feel and tell you, yes, I'm having that tingling sensation. Then you know that you have hit the right nerve at the very right place. That is the place where you deposit the drug, right? So landmark guided technique is basically knowing the anatomy properly, palpating the muscles and locating where there is the highest possibility of the nerve to be present, and then with the help of the patient who will be also guiding you whether he is feeling that tingling sensation, you deposit the drug over there, right? Next is what? Next is the PNS guided technique, peripheral nerve stimulator. 2-3 slides if you advance, you'll see I've given the picture of a peripheral nerve stimulator machine. Okay, so this is a machine which you utilize. You have seen ECG leads, right? There's rounded leads which you have put on the ECG to get an ECG done. That we take to get the electrical current waves in a peripheral nerve stimulator. So once we apply it on the patient and we give some current to the patient, if you are hitting the right nerve, there will be movement of the limb. If you hit the brachial plexus, it supplies the upper limb, there will be twitches of the limb. If you are hitting the nerve. If you are not hitting the nerve, the limb will remain as it is. So if you get twitches of the upper limb, then you know that you are hitting the brachial plexus. What is the advantage over landmark guided? Here you don't need the cooperation of the patient. Sometimes the patient might not be able to tell you whether he or she is feeling that tingling sensation. Even if he feels also, he will not be able to understand, and you might miss the spot where you want to give the drug. So instead, if you use a peripheral nerve stimulator, everything is done by you only. You are giving the adequate amount of current. If it is hitting the right place in the right nerve, then there will be movement or twitches of the upper limb. That's how you know that you are at the right place, and you will be depositing the drug over there to block the brachial plexus, right? And the third method is ultrasound guided. This is considered the best and the safest method, because you will be using an ultrasound probe to directly visualize the brachial plexus. So you exactly deposit the drug wherever the plexus is. You are not depositing, whenever you are doing landmark guided technique, it is kind of like blind technique. You are relying on the patient. So this is the peripheral nerve stimulator which we were talking about. The connections which you are seeing, all these are utilized to provide adequate amount of current to the patient, so that we can see the muscle twitches once the brachial plexus or any nerve plexus is hit, right? This is the brachial plexus anatomy. As you can see, there is the anterior scaleni and the middle scaleni. That yellow colored brachial plexus lies in between the two groups of scaleni muscles, right? If you provide a block exactly at the root level, you will be performing an interscalene block. If you provide the block just above the clavicle, that is termed as a supraclavicular block. If you provide it just below the clavicle, that is infraclavicular block, and if you provide the block at the level of the axilla, that is considered as axillary block, right? See, these are the roots, trunk, division cords, and the terminal branches which I was talking about. Blocking a specific level, blocking the roots is considered as the interscalene block. Okay, you have to give the block high up in the interscalene groove. Blocking the trunks and the divisions, they lie above the clavicle, right? The trunks, they lie above the clavicle. That is the supraclavicular block. And if you block it below the clavicle, the divisions are blocked. That is the infraclavicular block, and then comes the axillary block. So the indications are any surgery on the elbow, forearm, and hand. This is for the supraclavicular block. As we discussed earlier, like we were discussing with a clavicle fracture, for more higher up blockade, we need to provide the interscalene block. For a lower levels, we can provide the supraclavicular block. Then we can provide anesthesia for elbow, hand, and the forearm. What are the complications? Remember, for any block, there are very common indications, complications, and contraindications. Any block has very specific indications. It depends which nerve you are blocking. So whatever areas, whatever muscles, whatever zones it will be supplying, any surgery on that part forms the indication of that blockade. Brachial plexus supplies the upper limb. So any upper limb surgery is the indication for a brachial plexus block. Right. Only thing which you have to remember is at which level you are blocking. If you are providing an interscalene block, then you will be providing anesthesia for clavicle surgery. If you are providing a supraclavicular block, you will be providing anesthesia for elbow surgeries. So the level only differs, but the major surgery remains same. You only need to know which nerve plexus you are blocking and which area it supplies. When we will be studying the sciatic nerve block, so it is basically the sacral plexus. So which sacral areas does the sacral plexus supply? That only you need to know the indications of sciatic nerve block, right? Next, see complications. Again, similar for every nerve block. What are the complications? Any injury to the nerve plexus itself, that is the primary complication. And what are the other complication? Any injury to the surrounding structures. That is the complication of any nerve block. So first you have to know by heart the anatomy of the plexus or the nerve block you are going to perform. So any structure which is lying adjacent to that plexus, injury to that structure forms the major complications of that nerve plexus, right? So here you see, when you are blocking the brachial plexus, you got your sympathetic ganglion over here. If that gets blocked, what will happen? Horner syndrome will happen, right? If you are blocking it interscalene level, Horner syndrome is more common because the sympathetic ganglion lies more proximal to the brachial plexus. If you are blocking at the supraclavicular level, just above the clavicle, what structures you have got? You have got the subclavian vein, right? So you can accidentally prick the subclavian vein and you can inject your drug in that vein. That will lead to the complications of drug overdose, right? No local anesthetic, remember, is ever given in blood. Never ever any local anesthetic should be injected in blood because that leads to local anesthetic systemic toxicity. Okay, and that is not a desirable complication. That is very difficult to treat. Only lipid emulsions can treat it. So whenever you are injecting any local anesthetic, first concern is you should aspirate repeatedly. There should not be any blood in your syringe. If there is blood, discard. Discard the procedure as it is, right? So here Horner syndrome can occur. Phrenic nerve block. Phrenic nerve block is more common in interscalene because phrenic nerve, the roots come from C3, 4, 5. Okay, again, the cervical plexus lies over here. So any close proximity to those nerves, if the local anesthetics gets deposited over there in the phrenic nerve roots, then you will have that phrenic nerve block. You will have diaphragmatic paralysis. Patient might complain of difficulty in breathing. Next, see pneumothorax. Why? Because the apex of the lung lies just above the clavicle. Accidentally, if you prick the apex of the lung, pneumothorax might happen. It is a very common finding, but since we use very small needles, most of the times what happens, it heals on its own only. Even if it happens, you will provide oxygen, keep the patient under observation. Unless and until it is exaggerating or it is leading to something, tension pneumothorax or something like that grave, it generally gets corrected on its own only because we're using a very small needle for the blocks, right? So again, I'll repeat all the structures which are in close proximity to a nerve plexus. Whenever you are providing blockade of that nerve plexus, the complications are injury to those structures itself, right? Injury to the nerve plexus might lead to neuropathy. There will be the apex of the lung close to the clavicle, so you might have a pneumothorax. You have the sympathetic ganglion, blockade of which might lead to Horner syndrome. You have the phrenic nerve roots, C3, 4, 5. That blockade also will lead to diaphragmatic palsy, right? See, this is an USG guided supraclavicular block. The picture is taken. You will not be so comfortable with the USG pictures right now. The thing is, here we can exactly identify the subclavian artery. You can see the place where it is written, no, subclavian artery. This structure, can you see? It has a bunch of grape appearance, okay? This is the nerve brachial plexus block bundle when you are providing supraclavicular block. Like this, every nerve can be visualized in USG, and when you directly visualize the nerve or the nerve bundle, you provide local anesthesia directly at this place. So as you are providing anesthesia or the drugs directly after visualization, the risk of complications reduces. You will be careful not to touch the pleura so that pneumothorax doesn't occur because you can visualize it. Moreover, when the patient takes breaths, the pleura will move. So you will be confirmed that that is the pleura. So whenever you are visualizing and providing anesthesia, that becomes more safer. The chance of complications reduces. That is the greatest advantage you have of USG guided anesthesia. But the problem is you don't get it in every setup. That's why most of the places they practice landmark guided techniques, right? This is infraclavicular block. As you can see, the needle where we are pricking, see, this is the clavicle, and we are inserting or injecting the drug in the infraclavicular region at the divisions level, right? This again will also provide anesthesia for elbow surgeries, forearm surgeries, as well as hand surgeries. Interscalene block we already discussed. See, the complications same, ipsilateral diaphragmatic paralysis. This is severe hypotension and bradycardia because of the blockade of the sympathetic ganglion. There can be inadvertent epidural or spinal block. Why? Because this place is very close to the vertebral column. If you are not careful, if you keep on injecting without aspiration, you might by mistake inject the drug into the CSF level. That is very dangerous because if you have a cervical block, you can understand the whole body will be paralyzed. Okay, so nerve damage, any neural plexus blockade will have this complication of nerve damage. There can be pneumothorax, hemothorax, hematoma and infection. Why hematoma? Because the large vessels are present. If accidentally you prick in the vessels and the bleeding doesn't stop, there will be formation of hematoma. Okay. This is the anatomical landmark for the interscalene block. You can see the anterior scalene muscle, the middle scalene muscle. This is the interscalene groove. So at the upper part, this is the clavicle. When you're injecting drug at this place, this is the supraclavicular block. When you're injecting higher up, this is the interscalene block. And below the clavicle, here you will be performing the infraclavicular block. So the levels differ, okay, but more or less the regions remain the same. Only the interscalene block will provide a higher up anesthesia. It will be providing anesthesia for the clavicular region also, right? These are the landmark guided techniques how we perform. See, as the picture has been drawn, these are the two heads of the sternocleidomastoid. Okay, after palpating this, when we go further laterally, here you will get the anterior scalene, and in this region you will have the middle scalene, and in between at this the zone marked 4, that is the interscalene groove where you will be injecting the drugs. Axillary block, this is given at the level of the insertion of the deltoid. Okay, in the axillary region, just opposite to the insertion of the deltoid, and you will be providing the axillary block. This is only for the surgery of forearm and hand. This doesn't provide analgesia or anesthesia for elbow surgeries. Okay, that's the point. The more you go distally, the more your regions of operation or anesthesia also goes distal, right? This cannot provide anesthesia for elbow region because the nerve is already branching out before only. So if you are providing axillary block, you can only perform surgeries over the hand or distal forearm, not the proximal forearm. Similarly, indications, as you can see, elbow procedures are also successfully performed, but here the analgesia is not as good as the brachial plexus block in the supraclavicular or infraclavicular approach, right? Complications, same, nerve injury, intravascular injection. Which vessel is very close while you are providing axillary block? The radial, this axillary artery, not the radial artery, the axillary artery, right? So again, by mistake, like here we had subclavian veins and artery, here axillary artery, you can by mistake inject drugs into the axillary artery, aspirate and see there should not be any blood in your syringe, right? Hematoma and infection are rare complications. See, this is the technique. This is the point of insertion of deltoid, okay? Just on the opposite side, here you will be pricking. Here you will be pricking to block the brachial plexus at the axillary level. After the axillary level, all the branches start coming out. That's what I was telling about. You can't go beyond that. Beyond that, you will have to block nerve by nerve. That is not possible because there are so many nerves and branches of the brachial plexus. So if you need a full blockade, you will have to provide blockade only at these 4 levels: interscalene, supraclavicular, infraclavicular, or axillary level, right? This is the technique or the position of the hand for providing axillary blockade. This is the insertion of the deltoid, and you will be providing or pricking the needles just opposite to that in this axillary region, right? For all these blocks, I'm repeating, this is a purely practical thing. Come to the OT whenever there are orthosurgeries, generally, because general surgery rarely happens in the limbs and extremities. Everyday blocks are performed in OTs, okay? So it will be good for you if you see it once, and it will be easier for you to understand also. Okay, coming to the lower extremity block, where we are supposed to study today, the femoral and the sciatic block. This is the lumbosacral plexus. Okay, it comes out near the psoas region, and all the nerves will be coming out from the pelvis either through the greater or the lesser sciatic foramen, right? First thing, see, lumbar plexus gives rise to the femoral nerve. Lumbar plexus, as you can see, it is formed from T12 to L5, and the femoral nerve is formed by the ventral rami of L2 to L4. Okay. And this is the sacral plexus, and the sciatic develops from this L4 to S3. As you can all know, sciatic nerve is the thickest nerve in the body, right? So blocking the sciatic nerve is really difficult because you need to be very specific in your needle position. If you are not specific or particular or in the correct place, then adequate analgesia will not be provided. Patient will be complaining of pain. So lumbosacral plexus, from the lumbar plexus, the femoral nerve arises, and from the sacral plexus, the sciatic nerve arises. See, how do we perform the femoral nerve block? The blue part is the inguinal ligament, right? And here is the femoral nerve which comes out beneath the inguinal ligament. This anatomy, I guess everybody has learned in inguinal hernia cases also, which you see clinically. How do we perform the block? Have you ever done a femoral tap? Practicals, no. Okay. See, the anatomy you know, the mnemonic vein, artery and nerve for the femoral nerve. So the femoral nerve will be lying lateral to the femoral artery. How do you provide block by the landmark guided technique? You will first palpate the femoral artery. Femoral artery is a big artery, you can palpate it very easily. Just go lateral to it. Without pricking the artery, go lateral to the artery, you will be hitting on the nerve and deposit the drug. That blocks the femoral nerve. It is very simple. PNS guided also. You will be palpating the artery. You will go lateral to it. Once you hit the nerve, there will be twitches in the leg. Then you know you have hit the femoral nerve. And USG guided again same. You can visualize the femoral artery. You can visualize the femoral vein. Femoral arteries are non-compressible. Femoral vein can be compressed. That's how you know which is the medial side and which is the lateral side, and you prick on the femoral nerve and deposit the drug to block the femoral nerve, right? See, this is the lateral aspect. This is the lateral aspect, vein, artery. This is the side where the femoral nerve will be present, and you are supposed to deposit the drug or block the nerve over this region. See, this is the USG guided technique which we perform in any nerve block. There are two methods of doing a USG guided technique. One is in plane and another is on plane or out of the plane, right? In plane means when you are doing inside the plane of the longitudinal limb. That is considered as in plane. These are two methods. This is used according to the ease of the anesthetist who is performing. Some are comfortable in doing in plane, some are comfortable in doing out of the plane, right? See, in plane, the needle is inserted in the plane itself, right? And here outside the plane, from the outer surface of the plane. These are just two separate techniques. Whoever is comfortable in which technique they perform. Also, some nerve plexuses are present in such a way, their anatomy is in such a way, some provide in plane advantages, some provide out of the plane advantages. This is for femoral block. As you can see, this is femoral artery. This actually in picture it is not understood that much. Once you put the probe over a femoral artery and you press it, you can see the femoral artery cannot be compressed because the arterial walls are always thick. But when you see the femoral vein just medial to it, if you press the probe over it, it will get compressed. The circular structure which you can see on the screen, it will get closed in a minute only. So that's how you differentiate between a femoral artery and femoral vein. And vein you know will be on the medial side, nerve will be on the lateral side. That's how you identify the nerve and deposit your drug over there. Coming to sciatic nerve block. Sciatic nerve, as I told you, it comes out of the sciatic plexus. Then it leaves the pelvis through the greater sciatic foramen. It travels on the posterior surface of the gluteal region and posterior surface of the thigh. Just before the popliteal fossa, it divides into two branches, tibial nerve and common peroneal nerve. Tibial nerve will be supplying the lower part of the leg. Common peroneal nerve will be supplying mostly the lateral aspect of the leg. So before differentiation, before it divides into tibial nerve and the common peroneal nerve, there are again various levels at which sciatic nerve can be blocked. Like we discussed in detail in the brachial plexus, different places or different areas wherever we are blocking, that decides which area of the limb will be anesthetized. Similar is the case with sciatic nerve also. If you block it a little higher up, more dense blockade will happen. If you block it little lower, then the anesthesia will not be as good as blocking at a higher level. Okay, anesthesia or analgesia for surgery of the lower extremity, usually along with the lumbar plexus block. So brachial plexus has got one advantage. Okay, it is a complete plexus. It supplies the whole of the upper limb. So if you provide anesthesia to brachial plexus, the whole of the limb will be anesthetized. But sciatic nerve is just one nerve. Although it is a thick nerve, big nerve, everything supplies a huge part of the lower limb, it does not supply whole of the lower limb, right? So it is used more in case of analgesia than anesthesia. What is the difference? Analgesia means there will be sensory blockade for sure. There is no guarantee there will be motor blockade also, right? Patient will still have discomfort. It will be not suitable for surgery. Okay, if you just want to provide analgesia, keep the patient pain-free. For that purpose, blocking a big nerve is okay. Like, suppose you have done a, say, knee replacement surgery. Total knee replacement surgery under spinal anesthesia. Spinal anesthesia will wean off after 3 to 4 hours. Then after that, the patient will complain of severe pain. At that time, if you give a nerve block, that pain will be reduced. That nerve blockade might not be enough for one more surgery to do. That is not needed also. The surgery is already done. But if you provide that blockade, the patient will be completely pain-free for about 6 to 8 hours depending on the type of drug you are using. So you see, anesthesia or analgesia for surgery of the lower limbs. This analgesia term is very important because generally these nerve blocks we use in adjunct to some other anesthetic procedure. Like see, we can give spinal anesthesia and along with it one more nerve blockade. Because when the spinal anesthesia weans off, the nerve blockade will still remain and provide analgesia to the patient. We can give general anesthesia and give a nerve block. Why? Once the patient comes out of general anesthesia, the pain will start. But if you provide a nerve blockade, there might not be complete anesthesia, but there will be analgesia. The patient will be pain-free. Right. So it is for anesthesia or analgesia for surgery of the lower extremities. It can be given single-handed or it can be given along with lumbar plexus block. If you are giving it with lumbar plexus block, more dense and profound blockade is formed. That can provide anesthesia. For that, you don't need any other forms of anesthesia. Or if you give it with spinal anesthesia, as I was talking about, the spinal anesthesia will be for the surgery. The sciatic nerve block will be for post-operative analgesia. Okay. Surgery on knee, tibia, fibula, ankle, foot. Mostly whole of the lower limb, starting from the knee, whole of the lower limb surgeries to provide anesthesia as well as for providing analgesia. All the methods sciatic nerve blockade is performed. Okay. Contraindications. Similar to any nerve block, contraindications are if you have a coagulopathy, suppose. Why? As I told you, the blood vessels. There will be plexuses which are having major blood vessels nearby. If you prick the patient and patient has got a bleeding disorder, okay, and if you are not able to compress that vessel will keep on bleeding. That will lead to hematoma. So if you are having a patient with deranged platelet count, deranged PT-INR values, right, deranged APTT values, it is safer not to perform a deep nerve block like sciatic nerve block. Brachial plexus, you have an advantage, okay. If you hit the subclavian vein, I'm not telling it is superficial vein, okay, but still you can put pressure on it and stop the bleeding. It is considered as a relative contraindication. If the patient is having any bleeding disorder, coagulopathy, if you provide blockade and if you accidentally do an injury to the vessel, then that will bleed and that will cause a hematoma. That is not desired. But for sciatic nerve, which is like located very much deep inside, where you have to block the nerve at a much deeper level, if a hematoma forms there, it is difficult to stop that bleeding. Sorry, if it is difficult to stop that bleeding, you have to go for some other surgical procedures to remove that hematoma. So any sort of bleeding disorders, coagulopathy, it is considered as a relative contraindication for any nerve blockade, right? These are the approaches. Classic Labat approach is the most commonly practiced method. This is the block USG guided which you are performing as a subgluteal approach. As you can see, here is the gluteus maximus, here is the quadratus, and here you will be getting your sciatic nerve which you have to block. So it is a very deep nerve block. It has to be blocked with adequate amount of drug, with proper muscle twitches or proper visualization under the ultrasound guided. This block cannot be performed by landmark technique, and it lies very deep inside the muscle. It is always performed with a PNS guided technique or a USG guided technique under direct visualization. Complications can theoretically lead to pelvic needle penetration. If you're not conscious, it can, not aware of the complications, you can insert the needle into the pelvis and injure the pelvic structures, but it is very rare, it doesn't occur. Most common is rather hypothesia of the ipsilateral half of the genitalia. This is a common complication, and also it can lead to, as I said, since it's a deeper structure, any inadvertent injury of the vessels might lead to unrecognized bleeding and hematoma formation inside. Okay. Popliteal sciatic nerve block, as I said, just before the popliteal fossa, the sciatic nerve will be dividing into tibial nerve and the common peroneal nerve. At that place also, you can block the sciatic nerve for lower limb or foot surgeries. You can block the sciatic nerve to do this corrective foot surgery, debridement, tendon repair, right? Okay, so for all the blocks in general, I'll say first of all, you have to see this, somebody performing these blocks, what are muscle twitches, how you recognize if you're at the correct place or not. Firstly, you have to know the anatomy, because that is how you know where to put the needle or where to put the probe. Without knowing the anatomy, you cannot do it. Secondly, for every block, the indications, remember which place or which zone the nerve plexus is supplying. So any surgeries which are to be performed in that zone forms the indication of that blockade. Side effects, what can happen? Any injury to the nerve plexus itself or any injury to the structures which are lateral or in the periphery of that specific nerve plexus. Those are the complications. And contraindications, any coagulopathy or bleeding disorder is considered as a relative contraindication. Absolute contraindication for nerve block is single if the patient refuses to do. If the patient says, I don't want to have any needle pricks, I want to go for general anesthesia, pain-free, that is considered as the absolute contraindication. Patient refusal is the absolute contraindication for any nerve blockage, right? For any further things, I'll suggest better, if you get time, come to the OT on ortho OT days, and you get to see many, especially brachial plexus block is performed random. Many hand surgeries, clavicle surgeries are done, humerus surgeries. If you get to see it once, it will be easier for you to understand or see things. I don't think you have ever seen nerve plexus blockade in OTs. Right. If you get to see in OTs, it will be more easier for you, right?